order board meeting this Tuesday, May 12th. And just do a roll call, start with you.
Jay Ranger, Kevin Logan,
Tricia Schmidt,
Joel Dillon, David Ratz, Chair.
John Gordon.
Kathy Schlosser.
All right, having a roll call and having a quorum, I hereby move to open our board meeting. It's now 9 a.m. Is there a second? Second. All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. All right, ayes have it, so our meeting is now called to order. First item on the agenda is just the approval of minutes. You guys have the minutes in front of you in your packets. Had the opportunity to review those. If there are any amendments, edits, or anything that needs to be addressed in the minutes from last meeting.
I'm with the room.
Second. Right. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed say nay. All right, the minutes from March 10, 2026 are here. All right, second item on the agenda is the report from Al, the executive director. So I will turn it at this point over to him.
Thank you, appreciate it. Good morning. Today I'm going to talk about a couple of things. The organization structure and functions. I know we talked about that a lot, but I think over the last 5 months, it's kind of gelled into what we want. So you'll get a good feel for that. Also the IG audit update, the executive director search, and continued family engagement. After that, we're going to be talking about procurement policy, but after that, we're going to have some of our staff speak about some very specific issues that I know this board is interested in, including strategic priorities and program updates. I would like to say, given this opportunity, it's been awesome to work with the staff with the program. I want to let the board know that they've impressed me and are clearly committed to family-centered practice. They're getting out in the field and meeting with families when they need to, the case managers. But I think the families know that we answer the phone and we'll talk to them and we'll listen. They're doing an excellent job, the entire team. I give credit to each of them for the progress we are making and love that I have an opportunity to publicly thank. I want to spend a few minutes walking through our current organization structure. The chart is in your packet. And for those that are streaming it, it's on the website. You can look at it. It has names on it too. I point out that the biggest span of control for any leader is 6 persons. The total positions we have in the organization is 23. With 2 independent contractors, and then we have a contractor, a fractional CFO. And the 2 independent contractors, by the way, are for procurement, which is critical, very critical with all the contracts we had, and also a housing expert. Again, you can view them in your packet with the names on it too. The goal is to organize the program around how we serve families today. At a high level, the program is now organized into 4 major areas. First, administrative. The role was called the Chief of Human Resources. We have expanded that role to Chief of Administration. Margarita oversees that team. It involves human resources, so staff is supported, procurement and vendors, providers chosen properly and performing. That's what the procurement officer does. That's a key component of it. IT and how systems work, and also FOIA records officer. It brings our administrative support functions under one leader, making sure things get done. The second major area is the chief of staff function. And you all know Shelby, the board does, especially because she helps with board issues, but her role has been strengthened greatly. She is involved across the organization and helps ensure everything is connected and moving. She often has to keep me in line. Having a chief of staff is something I've never had before, and I really enjoyed it. She's done a great job, Shelby. She oversees communication, board support and governance, and cross-team coordination. We added a project manager under Shelby because that's all the connecting pieces of this, and it was a great fit. And she's involved in every aspect of the organization anyway. Instead of relying on an outside contractor to do this, it was more cost effective. So the person we had doing it before, even though they were part-time, was costing significantly more than if we hired someone internal, just so you know that. And it also gave us accountability and execution. That was very important. It's especially important right now because we have major initiatives under the care system and implementation of the new law. The third position in the workhorse is Kim, Chief of Program. Where's Kim? You all know Kim. I told her to wear pink so we couldn't miss her. This is where most of the direct work with families happens through case management, benefits and payments, policy, and quality. It was intentional to put these together to move away from siloed roles and to integrate the functions aligned with family-centered practice. Kim oversees 3 core functions. The first is case management, and you can see in the first row is Nurse Tammy. Amazing. She has case management, and she has, I think 4 staff. And 2 of them are MSWs, and the other one might as well be an MSW.
Jillian has one of the MSWs that we just.
Yeah.
Or in Jeff.
Yeah, and the other one, if you listen to her talk on the phone, you'd think she was able to. And Tammy keeps a small caseload of complicated cases, which is very impressive if you're taking on some difficult cases being in that leadership role, so thank you. They work directly with families day by day. In fact, we're gonna start tracking how often we go out and meet a family in the community. Because I think that's an important thing to show the board every month. That's one of the things we're gonna start tracking. The second part is benefits and payments. There used to be 7, and that's under Michelle Alvarez. I don't know if you've met her, but great worker, quiet, but very much a team player and great to work with. She leads the benefits and payments operations. They were separate, now they're merged. This includes claims reimbursement, specialized areas like van and home modifications and payments. And it focuses on making sure families receive services and payments accurately and timely. She is the one that supervises 6 people. And I think, even though 6 is fine, I think it's even better in this situation because the person who does the vans and the person who does home modifications is really interacting with everything, to be honest, just because there's so much involved with those 2 issues. The third is policy and quality. Susan, you can see her right there. Believe it or not, I wear glasses. You never see me wear glasses? If you saw me at home watching TV. This includes data analysts, and will support policy and quality work, audits, data integrity. Will also assist fund with provider assessments seasonal. And that's where results went to help with quality and stuff. So you're not, the families won't see her in the usual role, but she is gonna do a great job there. And seasonally, she can help us with collecting funds through the assessments, which we can do a lot better, and we're really looking forward to that. This team is leading our work to prepare for the July 1 legislative changes. They are also working closely with the Family Advisory Council to ensure families are part of policy decisions. Fourth is financial oversight. Stephen, he's in the back of the room. He's a fractional CFO, and everyone knows the great job he does, so I don't need to say anything about it. I'm not even gonna talk about it. Getting through those audits and stuff, right? And I think the key thing that we've been focusing on, and this is overview, is to make sure it is clear who is responsible for what. Improve coordination across teams, support faster and more accurate services to families, and prepare us for major changes coming up with the new laws and care system. The next thing I want to talk about is the IG audit update and financial controls. They're currently writing the final report. You know, we heard about the audits, we were years behind. We will not be behind again. This year, we will have the audit started and completed on time. We've signed a contract with an auditor for the next 3 years, so we will have that done. And for the families, that was probably the biggest issue with not finding some of the stuff that was happening before. If you don't do an audit, things can go wrong. So I'm very happy about that. We also, we expect the IG audit report not to tell us anything about that. In fact, the things we've been working on the past 6 months plus has been dealing with it, the control. Things like, fraud prevention, things like quick segregation of duties across all financial processes, multi-step approval for payments, including bill.com controls, independent custody and oversight of investments, quarterly financial reporting with CFO review, annual independent audit. This year, again, it'll be done on time, and the budget. And believe it or not, every week, we're going through all the money to look at each thing to make sure that it was spent for what it needed to be spent on. So I really enjoy those meetings, Stephen. Good. Next, the executive director search. We did it a little different, you know, we're gonna be family centered and decided right away, and, you know, David's pretty clear that we wanna be family centered in everything we do, so we decided to do the interview process, including the families at the front end. So the first time the people that met with anyone on the new job was to be able to ask questions of the families, so they could learn from the family's perspective what the job entails. So that was the first thing. That wasn't an interview. It was to get them ready to find out what they were getting into. The second part, we had Adonica, our attorney, meet with them and talk to them about the legal part. And that was very valuable for Adonica and for them to learn that part of the process, because there is a big legal part of the process to getting into the program and what happens within the program. After that, they went to interviews, and the process is still going on. We've had a couple more interviews later, but I think the process will give us someone who's really great to lead this program, be family centered, trying for. Next, I want to talk about family engagement. This is the last topic. Take a long time. We've launched a new training series focused on accessibility, education, and partnership with families. Our first session was with Northern Virginia. It's already available on a YouTube channel, but it dealt with guardianship. And the topic of trust is coming up next. We're gonna have experts be talking to families, especially with the new laws giving them access to trust and guardianships that the program will pay for. Very good law. Also, educational advocacy is coming up and what that means. This is part of a broader effort to ensure families are informed, supported, and actively engaged with partners in the program. I also want to take a moment to thank the families, especially the Family Advisory Committee. You know, when we started it, we thought they'd be helpful, but they are critical. We could not do this work without them. The stuff we learned during these meetings, and we've been talking internally, we're gonna have to find a way, because they're not just volunteers, they are working for the program. Believe it or not, the work they're doing is informing us, especially when you have standards like reasonableness. My reasonableness, where I don't have a child with a severe disability versus a parent who has a child with a severe disability, may not be the same. And so I think this is gonna be critical in how we navigate that, and also recognize their work with us. So for those on the Family Advisory Committee, thank you. And I hope we can get more families, because there's a lot of work to do with that. And that is my report. If there's any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
I'll open the floor now, if any questions, board members.
How many families are on the committee?
I think it's 12. 15. And when they did the interviews, we had groups of 3 families, 3 family members and the applicant. And by the way, we had over 40 to 50 people apply for the job, and there was a lot of talent. I mean, it was scary talent. I mean, we had a lot of people. We knew we were gonna get someone, and I think that was a big part of it, that first part when they got to listen to families.
And, yeah, I don't actually have a question, just a comment, Ellen and team, big team. I mean, this is an excellent report. And I think it's extremely thorough and obviously shows the tremendous amount of work since we have met. And I just want to congratulate you, thank you for your leadership and for your team.
Absolutely. In the org chart, just so you know, Kim pretty much in the leadership team They brought it to me and I approved it. They did the work. They are really good. They have talented leaders in this group.
Now, I did have a question. You had mentioned the auditors, and that we already have the auditor lined up for the upcoming audit. Is that the same? Is that still BDO?
The good news is, if you did an RFP, request for proposals, or I don't know what we call it in the state, but if you do that, you don't have to do it again. You're allowed to renew it. And so we renewed it for 3 years or 4 years, was it? See,
Well, I'm sorry, we're good for this year. There's actually been a little bit of adjustments we've needed to make. And so the years 2, 3, and 4 are actually we have to kind of redo some work in October based on something about procurement. But for this year, we are using BDO again, and they're going to come to the audit committee meeting on June 9th. It'll be a virtual meeting for the audit committee, to kick off the audits, and then our goal is the September meeting, we'll have it completed.
Okay, I know there was some discussion of that, so I just didn't know if that was carrying through with BDO or.
We are using BDO again this year.
Yeah, okay.
we have a good relationship with them. We think they're fair and honest and they're helpful and they can help move us forward. So we kind of stay with them.
Well, they understand, obviously, they understand the previous few years and they've gone through the audit process, so it behooves us to continue that forward. Yeah, they're not having to relearn it. They're rework.
You put out bid, it's no cost. Because whoever comes in, there's not solvable.
Yeah, sure. Well, they know what to look for already, so.
Also, your relationship, so that way, yeah, I know Steve is probably your best friend now.
Let them know there's more than they wanted. All right, well, that's it. Any other questions? Or any comments? All right, if not, then we'll move to the next item on the agenda. And that's the action items. I believe there's one item under the adoption for policy, and we're gonna have somebody speak.
We have Crystal Robbins joining us virtually. She's gonna share a little bit about, long-time policy.
Crystal, before you start, can you say your status? Because I know we contract for a procurement officer, but she's at a very high level. So maybe you can tell a little about yourself first.
Sure. So my name's Crystal Robins. I have spent the past 10 years working in the federal space. But before that, I did do state procurement as well. So, what all did you want to know about my background? I'm sorry.
All I know is when we had to choose, we could choose different levels, and you were at the top level. That's all I know. So whatever that meant, I thought you had something that put you at the top level.
I mean I do have the Virginia Procurement Officer you know, setting or you know, the certification. So I guess that's the top level.
Okay, can you tell about your procurement policy?
Sure. So today we're presenting a formalized procurement policy for your adoption. This is a critical milestone in the program's organizational modernization. As we grow, it is essential to move beyond ad hoc processes towards a scalable framework that ensures every dollar is managed with the highest level of transparency. This policy explicitly aligns our operations with the Virginia Public Procurement Act requirements, meeting the rigorous standards expected of a public body in the Commonwealth. By incorporating division of purchases and supply best practices and establishing clear purchase thresholds, we're creating a controlled operational structure that can evolve alongside our service offerings. Following today's approval, our next step is the publication of the full procedures manual by January of 2027. This will ensure our staff has practical tools and repeatable processes to maintain compliance while supporting a diverse vendor network. There was a small update made yesterday in our final review with the OAG. I think Shelby has a screenshot of that.
I do not.
Oh, okay, perhaps not. Okay, so the changes that we originally had contemplated a carve out exception for investment services, but determined that that was not an appropriate exception. We did add in an exception for benefit administration, meaning if we don't choose the vendor because the family chooses the vendor, that's not a purchase for us. We just pay it. I recommend the adoption of this policy with yesterday's changes as the foundation for our future fiscal integrity.
All right, thank you, Crystal. I'm gonna open it up for discussion here real quick, but maybe to start off, nothing more ahead of time, but Jonathan out here, if you could just so advise the board, is the Virginia Birth Injury Program required to go under the procurement, the state or Commonwealth procurement process? Is that a requirement by statute, or is that something selectively that the program decided?
It is a requirement by statute because we are considered a public body. We are required to follow the Virginia Public Procurement Act, and there was actually a memorandum that came from the Office of the Attorney General last October to formalize that opinion.
Okay, I'm gonna have council address that, Donna or Cal.
That is correct. In October of 2025, the OAG did submit an opinion to an official written opinion to the program indicating that the program does fall under the definition of a public body for the purposes of the Procurement Act. Even though the Birth Injury Act says the program should act consistent with the Procurement Act, we interpret that to mean that we should follow the Procurement Act. And we recommended that program do so.
Just one
Yeah.
add on to that. So the more specific statute for the actual fund itself says that the act, or I'm sorry, the program has to comply with the act for services not related to healthcare to claimants. So if it's related to healthcare to claimants, then it does not apply.
Okay, so just keep that in mind, obviously.
And there is a
Yeah.
provision that touches on that in the procurement policy.
I'm sorry.
There is a provision in the procurement policy that touches on that.
So I just want to give everybody the basis for the purpose of the Procurement Act. So I'll open the floor up, any questions or any edits, things. I've got some notes in there. Things that I'm looking to get addressed, but anybody have, up to everybody else at this point.
Helen, do you have a sense on how many, if I'm understanding correctly, large purchases, and the definition of that is in here, require board approval? How many large purchases are we making in any given year? I wouldn't want us to, hold up purchases because we only meet every so often.
I think you're gonna hear about contract we've eliminated later on in the presentation, but also talking about the delegation of authority is gonna happen later about when that needs to be, because there was a delegation of authority. At one point, you limited it extremely, and I think we need to revisit that.
And I'll ask council this, in the very first paragraph, or first section, incorporation of the relevant Virginia law. Just ask the opinion of OAG to just review number 3, all public entities in Commonwealth unless exempted must abide by the VBIF as a public entity in the Commonwealth Virginia birth related neurological injury compensation program is subject to VBIF. The only thing I would request is just to make sure that that's clear. If there are certain things that, if we're acting in consistency with the act, that's one thing. If we're required, we are by statute required to go under that act, then obviously that's something else. So I just don't, to me, when I read that, I just want to make sure the language doesn't implicate that we are a public entity for all purposes. Even though, I mean, we're supposed to be treated as public entity for FOIA purposes, the statute's very clear about that, but obviously we kind of ride that fence between being statutory or not, a statutory public entity. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that's actually a really good point. So under subsection 3, I think we would recommend just a quick amendment to that. It says as a public entity, pursuant to the Procurement Act or as a public entity for purposes of the procurement act. So that we're not saying it's a public entity under all scenarios. And then the other thing is, I would also recommend a change that says it's subject to the Procurement Act. We add in that language from our statute that says for purchases not related to healthcare.
So if we could make note of that, make that change during the process. Our policy, and that would be under paragraph 3, that first section. The other thing, and this may come up in further discussions, and I know it's been kind of used across the board. And I've mentioned this, and you mentioned this. Per statute, there's really I want to say two entities, but there's two parts of the Virginia Birth Injury Program, right? There's the program and the fund. Okay, and I've noticed in documents that we kind of use them interchangeably. And in this, for example, we have it listed as the Virginia Birth Related Neurological Injury Compensation Program, and then we abbreviate VBIF. And then in other documents, we say the fund. So I think from this point, we just have to be clear. Obviously, the program is overarching. The fund is actually by statutory set up a fund. So we got the program, the fund. The program draws off the fund. Obviously, the program is funded by the fund, but really two different things by statute. The statute has them separately listed. And so I think we just need to, be consistent in documents, be consistent across the board. We're going to call it the Virginia Birth Injury Program. It has to do with the claims, the benefits, the processing operations. Obviously, it's the program. Let's use the initial VBIP as opposed to VBIF, and then it just being confusing. I think I think it's a good distinction to start with. And that may have some ramifications as well. We'll talk about that a little bit more likely. But so that's one of the things I noticed out through documents. We can start making those changes, reflecting that whether it's contracts or does that bring up any other questions or this? In section 3, under general statements, transparency and accountability. Number 3 says transparency and public trust as stewards of public funds. I don't believe our funds are considered public funds. Correct me if I'm wrong.
They're not public funds.
Right, so that needs to be correct because we do not consider public funds. And obviously that has different ramifications if there are public funds. So I think that needs to be addressed. Any questions or discussion with regard to that? So I think that needs to be moved. Small purchase policy, I'll throw this out there. Do you have the limits in this? I'm not sure where the limits have come from or if they're in line with the Commonwealth's procurement policies, but the small purchase policy, 10 to 15,000. Then obviously the small purchase or the micro purchase, right? And then the small purchase and large purchase. Does anybody know if those are, and you can, Crystal, you can chime in or counsel if those are limits that are set out by statute somewhere or recognized by the Commonwealth, or is that arbitrary figures that programs put in place?
So they are figures that are used by other public bodies. So all across the Commonwealth. The 200,000, that is the one line in the sand that is by statute, that they have to then become large purchase and have these sealed bids.
My only question with that is, I mean, I know a copier could run you more than that nowadays. Is that a micro purchase, small purchase, or larger purchase, right? So to me, it seems low nowadays to have $10,000 to $15,000 micro purchase, and maybe that's accurate, that's fine. But I think that they have some questions that or suggestions or thoughts with regard to the limits.
Sure. So executive agencies are limited to 10,000, but as a non-executive state agency, we are permitted to choose a larger amount. Most of the other non-executive state agencies and higher education and things like that, they have done the exact same thing as us, where they kept the 10,000 for goods and services, but they raised it to 15,000 when it comes to technology, because the cost of software has gone up so much.
Well, that's my only concern is, I mean, everything's double, triple, quadruple.
Yeah.
So that, if those are based on, what everybody's been doing, but they've been doing that for the last 20 years, that may not be realistic. So I don't know if anybody has any thoughts with regard to that, or just keep it as it is. You can always, obviously adjust it down the road if you need it, but, Alan, I don't know, or maybe Stephen, you want to chime in too. Does that threshold 10 to 15 sound realistic for micro purchases? As far as things like IT?
It's low.
That's my concern.
It's low. I don't think I've bought anything that little, that's a micro for technology, unfortunately. Wow.
Well, I mean, that's really my concern. So,
That's low.
I mean, do we want to raise that limit? I understand, that's kind of the amount that a lot of bodies are using, but again, I don't know how old that is. So, they may have been using it for the last 20 years.
And it may be helpful, like a micro purchase means you don't have to compete at all. It means I just go out on the internet and I make a purchase, like I just buy something. So most of the time, public bodies want to limit the micro purchases because that means that the higher it is, the more risk you have as an organization that someone could buy something that is non-competitive, that is like, a software that doesn't isn't compatible with your system, and then you've wasted money. And so they kind of limit that to day-to-day things. If you need a new printer or something, nobody needs to go do a whole bunch of work for that. But when it's beyond that threshold, then you should start doing some sort of competition or having some sort of contract with a vendor.
I'll ask this too, Alan, obviously we haven't been that launched program, but Shelley, maybe you can chime in, or Kim, are there any operational day-to-day things that you run into that seem to be at that threshold that you think, well, it's, that's just too low? Or is that pretty much, do they all fall in under from a day-to-day basis?
I would say it's pretty fair. Like, for instance, Slack is under that threshold for IT. So for Slack, in the internal communications tool, we're able to make that purchase annual renewal without any complications. I don't think in the last couple, I think that's the only one micro purchase that I can think of in the last.
Yeah, Asana is also under the threshold box. There's several of our small software solutions that are under the threshold. There's most of our equipment, things like printers and faxes and things like that, they all fall under that threshold. Small repairs that need to be done, if you need to install a bunch of whiteboards or something like that, that falls under the threshold. Those are the sorts of things that, everyday purchases that fall in that category.
So I think it sounds like that's at least an appropriate threshold at this point. That's fine.
And we can come back if like we go back to our corner and we realize that, we can come back to the board, we can ask them to change them if we need to.
Okay. So everyone's. In under small purchase policy, you get invoice and micro purchases, maybe paid directly or by purchase order. If purchase card is not accepted by the vendor, the reasonable feasible prices, feasible and when price competitive. Does say VBIF will solicit quotes and use vendors with SWAM or other small business status for micro purchasing. And SWAM is listed up above that. Again, I'll put this out there. Do we want that? That tends to be somewhat exclusive as well, or could eliminate some vendors that maybe don't fall under SWAM. Okay.
So we're not like the executive agencies where we have to only use SWAM vendors for micro purchases. We're saying we just prefer them. Or we just give them opportunities, I should say.
Well, to me, it seems a little exclusive. So it just says VBIF will solicit quotes and use vendors with SWAM or other small business status for micro purchasing. Then say it may or prefer. I mean, to me, this looks like we,
I think it says where reasonable and feasible, right?
Yeah, those were reasonably feasible.
Yeah. So, I mean, that, again, I'm just throwing these things out there for discussion purposes. If
Okay.
everybody- We'll leave it. All right, the other one is under tied bid policy. The last bullet point, goods produced in the United States still tied, the winner must be decided by lot, point costs, or drawing names. It seems a little archaic, but I can be. It seems a little odd, but anyways, you know, if we are in that type of high bid, I'm gonna be comfortable with flipping the coin. Or should there be somebody that makes the decision?
I'm used to having the leader make the decision.
That's right. Yeah, all right, so let's amend that, I guess maybe the tiebreaker would be the director.
I appreciate the confidence, and I will take that on.
All right, sounds good, so if we can make that official, as well. All right, under emergency procurement, emergency is defined as a situation that threatens the health and safety of program plan, financial operations, or for the preservation of physical property. My question is, in that reading, financial operation, use of financial operations. To me, it reads, emergency is defined situations threatening health or safety for program claimant, financial operations. Does that mean the program claimant's financial operations or the program's financial? And the preservation of physical property. So do we want to look at what we're defining as emergency a little better? With more clarity.
If I may, what I have also seen in other policies is the language of, or requires immediate action. So that may help with determining financial operations. We could say, financial operations of stakeholders, perhaps, but like I said, I've also seen immediate, actions, situations that require immediate action.
Right, my question more so here is this referring to financial operations of the program, or is this financial operations based on claim or a beneficiary or stakeholder? That's my question. To me, it wasn't very, it's not clear what it's referring to, financial operations of what? Okay. But I like the idea of immediate action, but I mean, is an emergency circumstances, if the program comes in and there's kind of benefit or something, we've got to procure something right away. Or it has to do with the financial operation of the program, does that fall under emergency procurement or not?
It should be both. If it's our purchase, it's both. So we're not always purchasing things for claimants, but in the instance where we are, then it would be both.
Okay, so I think better to define that.
Okay.
Both program or funds. Alright. The other one under contract modifications, I have noted. When fixed price contract may be increased by more than 25% of the original amount, or 50,000, whichever is greater, without advanced written approval from the program, per applicable signatory authority policy. If and so,
And that's directly from statute, so we have to have that in our policy.
okay, is it per statute that it requires approval from the program or for the board of directors?
It just says written approval, so it's silent.
Okay, so that's my question for the board. If that's something that we should have approval of the program or program director, or should it be by approval or of the board of directors? So.
I think it should be a program. I mean, I would see us have to get involved with them. I don't see I mean, we're trying to tie the hands of the program before we have to. If we have the right leadership in place, the right controls in place, we should not be in it.
Well, sure. My question is, okay, then if what would fall under this fixed price contracts? We're talking about a $500,000 contract. It's this fixed price contract, and maybe that's not realistic. Is that something we want to give the authority to the program director to increase?
Maybe
This is more than 25%, or do we, as a board, still need oversight?
and I'll probably change that, if, 25% or 50,000. 50,000 I think is low, but I don't think it should be.
Well, I think that's, I think Crystal said that's statutory, correct, the 50,000?
The 50,000 is statutory, yeah.
So we can't change the amounts, the only question is who, who needs to have approval if it exceeds that? Is that just the program director? Whether it's Alan or obviously
Why can't
successors?
we put more? I mean, you can leave that, but then add it, this above a certain amount, and it has to come to us. Anything over 50,000,
Isn't the delegation of authority dealing with that? Like when there's gonna be a delegation of authority for the program administrator that you draw the limits on a separate document.
Well, right, but if we're having a policy in place, that's gonna govern,
Yeah.
right? So my question here is, this is gonna be the policy. So do we want to keep the policy, if something comes in and let's say there's a 50% on a contract and it exceeds 50,000? Is that something the board wants to have oversight? And maybe should we have oversight of that? Because obviously, it's doing finances. Or do we want to leave that at the program level? If it's exception, again, if it's under that, then it's.
I think the board needs to have approval on something. We don't want to micromanage what the other side of it is.
In my experience, you have a budget, and the budget's gonna have money for different things. And as long as the program administrator doesn't violate that budget, you've already approved that budget. So I kind of think it's already,
But I think this is the instance of when it goes over.
When it goes over.
That's the, right. So if you've got it budgeted in for the price of the contract, let's say it's 200,000.
Yeah.
Right, and the vendor then comes back and says, we're gonna have to increase it to 400,000, well, that's outside the budget. But then is that approval of the program, or should it be approved by the board of directors? That's a 50% increase. Yeah. Under contract.
well, wouldn't have to amend the budget.
Well, right, but
I'm gonna have to come to you anyway. No matter what, I'm gonna have to come to you to change the budget if I'm spending more money than is allocated for that. And that's the way I've always done it before.
right, so then do we just make that consistent? If it's
Yeah.
something like that, then it just goes to the board of directors.
the basically saying 50,000, because that's 25% or 50,000, so.
Whichever is greater.
Whichever is greater,
Right, so it could be
yeah.
great, yeah. So if you look at a large contract, it may exceed 50,000. But it may still fall under that 25,000, the 25% threshold. So it's not limited to 50 if it's still under the 25% if I'm reaching.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think you're still safe there. I just think it's when it's gonna be a dramatic increase, obviously, who has the approval of that? My only concern is if it's such a grand increase, then shouldn't that go to the board?
So what you're saying is there should be an additional sentence that limits what the increase by, that limits what that 25%, a cutoff for the 25%.
No, we just changed the wording from a written approval from the board of directors instead of the program. That's it. Change.
I mean, it could also mean a $20,000 contract that went up by 5,000. So there could be a lot of volume.
I don't wanna limit, I think if you're going to bring it back to the board, there needs to be, and if the 25% hits a certain threshold, then it comes back to the board, but if the 25% is $2,000.
Right.
Who cares? I mean, I
that's the question.
care, don't get me wrong, but it shouldn't come to the board.
So that's the question.
Well, yeah, so what's the number that the 25% cuts off?
There is no cutoff. The statutorily, if a fixed price contract increased by 25% or by 50,000, whichever is lower.
It says greater.
Whichever is greater.
It says
Greater. Okay.
Yeah, so it's
But if it's a $50,000 contract, 25% would be, if it went increased by 15,000, that would be, yeah.
But what if it's $1 million contract?
Then it would be over 50,000, right?
Right, then you're talking about 200,000, right?
Right.
Right. Do we need a cutoff for what, like? At 250,000, if it exceeds 250,000, it comes back to the board, that's what I'm saying, is that what we're talking
I
about?
think it would, well, the only question is, if that happens, does that need approval of the board, or does that
Correct.
need approval of the program?
So that's what I'm saying, do we need a number
Yeah.
for when it comes back to the board in that 25%, a second sentence?
Well, I think the scenario you're asking is if it's a smaller contract, and let's say the price increases by 50%,
Right,
and that 50% is only 2,000.
right,
That still qualifies under this
Correct.
because it hasn't met the 50,000.
it says big
So it
one,
still stays,
right.
still stays discretion, right? The only time this is gonna kick to whoever we give authority approval to is if it's either 25,000 or 50,000, everyone's great. So the small ones are not gonna matter.
Right.
Right, so that's fine. So, you know, if I'm hearing it's right, I think we should instead of from the program, should be from the board, correct? So that's the only time it's gonna kick in.
In excess of it.
In excess of 50,000.
Yeah.
Or,
That's all right.
or the 30, what's that?
I don't,
Could you also just require a report to the board of directors in these instances? That way it's not a waiting for an approval, but it's if it's in the program, could there be a report?
Well, here's my concern, and again, it's not necessarily Alan or whoever. But let's say you have a director that decides, well, you know what, I'm just gonna arbitrarily make this decision for $500,000. And you know what, I'll tell you next month at your board meeting, are we gonna be fine with that?
No. See, my thing is, I don't have a problem with 50, but there should be a threshold higher than that needs to come to us. 50 is too low to be coming to us every time you get something. So Stephen, what's the total expenses of the program?
The total sort of, discretionary expenses, so excluding the funds that go to the families and participants. This year, we set a budget of 6.2, I believe.
So what's the mid?
Yeah.
So these numbers, the 25% of 50,000 are statutory. We
Yeah,
can't
yeah.
change that.
No, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
why can't they just go anything, you can say, anything up to whatever, 200,000
Approval by the program.
by the program, anything above that comes out, you don't have to change that sentence. it's
yeah,
just
you
be a
just
did,
to add
that's
it.
what
Yeah,
I was trying to
yeah.
say too,
Okay.
you set a threshold for what your 25% means.
Okay, so without advanced approval from the program, however, if,
So change from the program to from the executive director, that's the program, that's the person leading it, and then anything above that needs to come to us. Or whatever that number is, whatever the other.
yeah, and so let me ask this, because that last little tag per applicant signatory authority policy. Yeah, I'm gonna ask the obvious question, what's that refer? Is that the authority of the program director?
Should be consistent with that, whatever that is, last time we looked at that.
Well, right, so. Can we limit it in that sense based on whatever signatory authority we have? So if we do the authority to the program director at 200,000 threshold, does that then help us in that scenario? Is that the-
Yeah, cause that way it keeps us from being involved, I mean, in
Exactly.
Sure.
But this should be consistent, so do we put the number in both documents, or is one,
They should be
Sufficient.
consistent, they should be consistent between the authority we give,
Right.
the authority in, that should be considered, whatever that is.
Yeah.
Stephen, quick question for you, you've been at this for a while now, how often have we run into scenarios like this?
Their cost has gone up.
But yeah, contract modification, significant contract modifications that are percentage wise, I know the BDO thing was a big one that came up recently, but that's the only one I can think of.
Yeah, so, I would say as part of, the procurement sort of evolution, there's a. Maybe say it a little bit differently, before October of 2025, like, there may have been some changes that I can't like come to right now, but that might have hit some of these thresholds since then. I can only think of the PDO
Yeah.
thing. I will just qualify for the board, we're all learning as we go through this, and I think in the last board meeting, I said our budget was about a 6 out of 10, and so I think we're gonna be learning a lot. this year as we sort of compare our actuals to our budget and so I would encourage the board not to put too many constraints on it, at least this year, while we sort of are working out the kinks. But I think that $200,000 threshold feels very reasonable to me.
Yeah, and I agree that, the reason I asked the question, I think it's good to have parameters in place and know what they are, but we might be solving for a problem that rarely comes up. Yeah, and so I agree, but I don't know how specific we want to get and how many constraints we want to put around it for something that rarely could that really come.
I can only, thinking about it, addressing the question, I can only think of that one thing. Since October 2020. So that's 8 months.
Right, well, we want those examples.
But
there,
yeah.
when it does come up, it's not a cheap, right? It's not a cheap problem to then fix. Right. So if it comes up, it's gonna be a very expensive issue. So that's the only question, and, maybe it's because of what I do, you try and put that protection in place first before you have to do it, fix it. So I think we probably need to look at that paragraph, maybe just write it a little better, put. Like I said, maybe put a threshold in here that we can then be consistent with that. So, again, I don't know if we want to take that up and still bring that to the next meeting, or, any other suggestions on both.
With these, let me just make sure I understand, but the things that we're talking about now, there's some things that are gonna have to be rewritten, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so this policy is evidently gonna come back to us for final approval. So can we not move from this topic, do the authority, and then put that number into this once, do you see what I'm saying, rather than go on with this, we can add it after we do the next part, the threshold number.
Sure.
That way we're
Yeah.
being consistent. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
If I can also add just one other thing, we've had one example, and I think this is a reason for a high threshold, that did end up costing us maybe 6 or 8 weeks of time in order to complete the audit, so there's a cost that comes along with this. And again, I think that would encourage a high threshold to make sure that we are capturing the things that truly matter, but also giving the flexibility to move relatively quickly, because that is, I think arguably that was the reason why it was the March meeting that the audit got done instead of the January meeting.
Right, yeah, so we need to have, I think, well, agreed, there needs to be some threshold there, we don't want to deal with very small things, which, again.
Right.
I think we're all in agreement, that something with 75,000, we would probably consider that still pretty small. Right, so this would hardly fall above that, so if we have a threshold in that window of 50 to 200 or more. So it would probably just regraph that. Okay, so, the only other part is I don't want to put that off too, we gotta have permanent policy in place. So I think we talked about maybe doing a virtual in June, because we've got the 2 board positions, so maybe table that, so.
Well, I think
Get
it's
some
table the
edits.
final approval, but I think we can insert what
Yeah,
number we want after we do the authority.
Well, we can work on that.
And that, so we can have that number before we leave
If you get
today.
the rest of the feedback, we'll take it back and.
Right.
We're listening to you.
Right.
So we'll put it back and, we'll bring it back and then we'll have a couple choice points that you guys left.
Yeah, we can make that,
Yeah.
and obviously we can do it for final approval. Okay. The only other one there, and again, this is the question, E-Verify, all contracts between 50,000 with an employer, more than 50 employees will agree to register versus state and federal E-Verify. Is that a statutory number?
Yes.
Okay. That's it.
We can
Okay.
require it for lower, but it doesn't make sense to do.
All right.
Now you know why I call you all the time. Make sure you know what's going on.
All right. All right, any other questions or points of discussion? All right, sorry to belabor that first.
Shall we just break notes?
All right, so at this point, we'll move to our next item, the next priorities. First of all, the legislative update. I think Sarah's gonna speak about it, correct?
Yes.
All right. Oh, Sarah.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sarah Birch, Senior Program Analyst, and I'm going to talk you through the recent changes to the legislation, which I'm sure all of you are very familiar with. And more importantly, I'm going to tell you about the process that we have set up to bring benefits administration into alignment with the new law when it takes effect on July 1. Next slide, please. So as you know, the Virginia General Assembly passed this new legislation at the end of March. The governor then approved that with some relatively minor amendments. And then both members of the General Assembly approved the legislation with those amendments, and it became law on April 22nd. And the law will take effect on July 1. Next slide, please. So the legislation touches several different parts of the program, its governance, its operation, and the administration of benefits. Obviously, this has financial implications, but I won't be going into detail on most of those today. So we're going to start with the key changes to governance and oversight, which obviously is an important factor for the board to take into account. So the board will continue to have 9 members as it does today. Per the new legislation, one of those members will be a relative of a current or a former program participant. The legislation also requires that the board meet at least monthly and allows virtual access, which obviously we've already transitioned to virtual access. There are some new oversight mechanisms as well. So the board of directors is required to establish a blanket surety bond in the program. And the idea behind that is to help ensure that any employees and officers that are handling funds do so appropriately. So right now, the program has some coverage through the Division of Risk Management's blanket surety bond plan, but program staff is currently soliciting quotes for additional coverage. And our plan is to come back to the board probably at the next meeting with some quotes and options for additional coverage for the board to consider and approve. There's also an additional provision. The Auditor of Public Accounts for the Commonwealth can analyse our annual audits and provide any relevant information directly to the Governor or the General Assembly as appropriate. There's also a provision in the law that allows the Workers' Compensation Commission to award interest where it determines that the program has unreasonably delayed any payment or reimbursement. So that would be in addition to the payment that would be tallied. So now we move from governance to operations. The new law requires that new claims, so petitions to enter the program, can be filed electronically. That is done through the Workers' Compensation Commission. And the fund is required for the legislation to pay to set up this electronic system. And that you can see at the bottom here, the estimated cost of that is about $1.5 million to set it up, and then about $20,000 to maintain that this year. So there are also some changes required to be made to the plan of operation. So this includes a process to ensure that the program responds and acknowledges requests for benefits within 15 days, to have a clear timeline for when families can expect to receive those payments, systems so that families can track the status of their claim in real time and understand if and how that is progressing. An explanation of benefits or EOB for every claim that is submitted, as well as a secure claims submission portal that is HIPAA compliant. So we are in the process of revising the plan of operations. Again, this is a board approved document, so the plan is to come back to the board to have you all approve that. And then the next step is that it is submitted to the SCC, the State Corporation Commission, for its approval as well. And many of the changes that you see here on the slide, the previous slide, they will be operationalized through the new CARES portal, and Kim will be presenting on that in a little bit. So now we move to the key changes to benefits and compensation for our families. So the new legislation increases compensation for families who have children who pass away shortly after birth. And that increases from $100,000 up to $500,000. Another key change in the legislation, and this is something that keeps some of us up at night, is how we are going to move towards this reasonable standard. So the legislation disallows any caps on hours or monetary figures in terms of how we administer benefits, and moves towards reasonable and necessary benefits administration. So I think this is going to feel very different in a good way for our families and our programs, and we are working very hard with the Family Advisory Committee to figure out how to assess these claims in accordance with the new standard, which is going to be more individualized and based on the participant and the family's needs. So an example of this is currently there is a regulatory cap of $175,000 on housing assistance for participants over the course of their life. But the new standard will be what is reasonably and medically necessary in terms of providing assistance for housing over the life of the participant. And there are several other regulatory caps you can see here, for example, on vans and hours of reimbursable care that will also be removed as of July 1. The legislation also adds some new benefits categories. So firstly, Alan mentioned we had a training on guardianship recently. The program will now cover expenses associated with the appointments of guardians, conservators, trust documents, and other sort of legal mechanisms to help claimants as they move through financial planning and other decisions. There's also a new benefit, expenses associated with the services of an education advocate, as might be needed for participants who are in educational environments. There are also some increasing benefits. So end of life expenses such as funerals, that is increasing from $5,000 in current regulations up to $10,000 per the new legislation. There's also increased support for family members in terms of counselling and psychotherapeutic services. So that increases from $1,500 to $10,000 per year for family members that live with participants. All right, so that concludes the overview of the key changes. And now I will tell you a little bit about what we are doing at the program level to make sure that we bring benefits administration into alignment with these new standards by July 1. So on the next slide, you can see a visual representation of around 15 different categories of benefits that we administer. There's medical and related benefits, general support benefits like housing and vehicles, caregiving benefits, which is a hugely important to our families, end of life benefits. And then at the bottom here, importantly, there are some cost cutting issues that we're reviewing, including this new reasonableness standard, as well as how we process claims. So we are looking at all of these different benefits by July 1 to bring them into alignment with the legislation. So our goals here, we want to make sure we're in alignment with the legislation. That's number one. We also want to make sure that we are administering benefits consistently and fairly among our families. And we want to take this opportunity to really streamline and reduce administrative burdens. We hear often from our families that there are pain points, there are challenges, there are barriers to accessing the benefits they need in some instances. So we really want to pare that back and facilitate access as best we can. So what's our process? As I mentioned, we're looking across these 15 categories of benefits. Obviously, we're looking at the new legislation, the current regulations, our handbook, other forms and agreements that we use to administer the benefits. And we are drafting interim policies across all these benefits areas. The intention is that these interim policies will guide benefits administration from July 1 until the new regulations are developed. As many of you would know, that process, the regulatory process in the Commonwealth can take quite a long time in some instances. So we are taking this approach to make sure that on July 1, we are complying with the new law, and then we will follow the regulatory process. And that may go on long after July 1. You can see here sort of a timeline of the process, and here I just wanted to call out the Family Advisory Committee's feedback and work with us. It says we were going to get their feedback in mid-June. But as Alan alluded to earlier, we have been working very hard already. I think we've had 2 or 3 meetings. We added an additional meeting with the fact, because they have such great insight, experience, and really expertise that we're learning from. And that is filtering into the interim policies. And it will, of course, continue to inform our policy making process going forward. So we really appreciate the fact members the time we are asking a lot of them. I just want to thank them all for their input and really acknowledge that, and that we are looking at ways to thank them and acknowledge and recognize their contributions as we go forward. I wanted to briefly mention a distinction between what we're doing now in terms of this rapid review process and policy making more broadly. So right now we are responding to changes that are required by the legislation. These are not discretionary or new or changing policy in that context. So we are really focused on removing caps and limitations and other barriers and streamlining our processes as required by the legislation. There will be a continuous policy development process going forward. We'll really ramp that up after July 1, and I'll be talking a little bit about that later on in this meeting. So I think we all feel like we're moving into a new phase in response to this legislation, and it will feel different, hopefully in a good way, for the program and for our families. But there is going to be a lot of change. So we are taking steps to make sure that families feel ready for this and our staff are ready to administer benefits in an appropriate way from July 1. So to that end, Alan hosts monthly bridge calls. We have monthly newsletters, which have included a lot of information on the legislative changes. Our family advisory committee is informed and really inputting into how we undertake this process. We also sent out a brief to families that was intended to be short, plain language to try to familiarize families with the new benefits, the expanded benefits, and the new standards. And of course, we have our great case specialist team. So they're the people that answer the phones. They're the first point of contact in most cases where families have questions about how their benefits are going to change and will from July 1. And that's all I have for you. And that's my any questions or comments.
All right, I'll look forward for minutes and questions.
General.
Go ahead. No, you go first.
Given all the change, the changes that we're going to have an impact on how you will operate, then also because of the changes, do you feel comfortable with, from a resource perspective, overall training, understanding? Do you have what you need? Basically, the question: do you have what you need to build your model?
Well, it's interesting because our newsletter this time, I wrote an article on being a learning organization and trying to get the families to understand we're going to make mistakes and that's how we're going to learn. But I think we're being very open about it.
Okay.
And I'll tell you, Sarah's doing an amazing job working with these families. In fact, the first call scheduled for 15 minutes, I think we went 2 hours. The families wanted to keep going. I think they were getting a lot out of it too. And we're taking on the issues that you kind of don't want to take on because they're, like things like, what if the family's separated and they both want housing modification? Things that are just scary, like what happens then? We're taking them on, we're talking to the families because we want to know what they think is reasonable. And I think that that's a good thing. If we don't want to talk about it, we need to talk about it more actually. And I think we're going to get there. I think July, we're going to hit the ground running as best as we can, knowing our goal is to be consistent, but we also know we're going to make mistakes. And just because we make a mistake by giving someone too much or too little, it doesn't mean now everyone gets too much or too little. We need to understand that we're going to be learning as we go through this.
And Sarah has also been holding weekly office hours with our staff, educating them on the changes, really trying to evolve the way of thinking and the mindset. Because as you can imagine, this program has administered benefits in a certain way for 30+ years, and now there are no caps. And that just requires a very different mindset for our team members. So that has been really great and helpful. We have a weekly legislative implementation meeting with leadership. So it's going well so far. And as Alan mentioned, we're going to learn a lot, continue to learn a lot from our families. And, as we kind of go through the process to stand all this sort of new way of thinking up by July 1st. So.
And I think the part about talking to staff about it, all staff, even people that aren't even involved in it, so
Yeah.
everyone knows, is gonna have a big impact on families, because what happens is they call the van person's not there, they're calling someone else, they might not know the whole picture. So I think the families are gonna understand that holistically, everyone's informed about what's going on, so it's gonna make the calls not like, they didn't know what was happening or whatever.
Yeah, and it's actually, it's kind of like starting over, which I think is gonna be helpful for the case management team, all of the team members, but particularly case management as sort of our front line with our families. Because, you know, we were hiring people over the course of, you know, months last year. And I don't know that everyone had the benefit of a robust onboarding process, we'll say. And so, kind of reteaching folks now from like the ground up has been sort of a better orienting process, if you will.
And I'll just add very briefly there, in terms of this being a learning experience, we have these interim policies. They can be revised and refined as we find issues with them. And then that can feed into the regulatory process. So by the time we get to make the regulations, which are of course more difficult to amend, we will have learning through these policies as well.
You know, the cool thing about the rulemaking is that drags a year behind. I mean, it takes years sometimes to get the rulemaking. But we figure as we get to the rulemaking, we'll kind of learn all our lessons, and then the rules will actually be good.
The only comment I was just thinking was, you made the statement that we're moving into a new phase of response to this legislation, and I'd just like to make the comment that I think this board, recognized that need and was moving in that direction without the need of legislation. I'm grateful for the program taking that on. I'm grateful for the board recognizing it. We were going down the right pathway. They may have added a few, well, they added a lot of changes and maybe put some numbers and some specifications to where we were going, but I do think that it's important to note that we were going on the right pathway and then legislation kind of caught up with her.
Thanks.
Or caught up with this. The question I have for you, and I hope we never need this again, is back, when it says with the interest, I hope we never have these late payments ever again. But I'm glad this is in here in case we do. I'm a little confused at the commission. How does, I got a late payment. We should know that and apply interest, you know, that's been my feeling all along. Why, how does it get to the commission and why does it need to automatically go to the commission? What's that process? I'm a little confused with the commission being involved.
That's based on the legislative language, so I assume if, you know, if the family wanted to follow that process, they would have to reach out to the commission to have that interest levied. But I take the point that it's a good one. Firstly, there should be no unreasonable delays for payment. And secondly, perhaps the program, you know, can reach out to families and whatever.
Recognize it
anything.
before, because if they go to the commission, they're gonna need, legal help to do that, correct? They don't do that on their own. Yeah, I would like us as a program to recognize it, take care of it, and it not have to go to this level. If there's some way
Well,
to
I
put
would
that
tell you
into a
that
process.
the meeting with, WCC about having, mediation in situations like this, and they've been very receptive. To basically have mediation for non-attorneys, encourage non-attorney listeners all get together. And they've been receptive. We're actually gonna do a pre-pilot with the case, just to see if we can resolve it and see how the system works.
Okay, good. That was my question.
And for those, 6% of such current statutory.
And that's going from July 1st on, so it's not retroactive to.
No provisions of the legislation are retroactive, so everything we discussed.
I was just gonna say, first of all, thank you, great presentation, and obviously a lot of hard work. Appreciate that. Just curious, you know, there's, I can imagine, any population, 20% of the patients, 20% families. If whomever you're working with, that no matter what you do, they just don't seem to get the information, they're overwhelmed with their life, they focus with what's right in front of them, take a step every day. Is there any plans to look at that type of family and how we support that going forward?
Very undecided. So I think, one, the team in our program has been stood up relatively recently, the case specialist team. So every family, if they want to have a case specialist, has a dedicated case specialist who continues with them. And part of that role is to reach out and say, hey, do you know you're eligible for 3 benefits that you're not currently accessing? Is that something that will assist your family? So being proactive in terms of making contact, reaching out and facilitating access. Of course, respecting that some people may not want to be contacted or may want to be contacted on a certain cadence in accordance with their needs.
I feel that's correct. As we get to know the families better, aware of their needs, and I hope as we get to know them and we are able to speak to them kind of an age-specific guide, speaking to them like home modifications, looking at maybe someone that has a 3-year-old, what that home would look like, a 10-year-old, a 20-year-old. So helping them look at the benefits according to the age of their child, the age of the caregiver, the parent's choice, if they want their child to go into a long-term care facility, that we're looking at an individualized approach, but also age-specific. With the care system, there will be flags or triggers built in that'll show eligibility for things, as well as how much of it is being utilized. It will help us. We are annually going to do around the birthday month we've talked about, looking at each participant family, what resources they are using to help us, prompt us to like, let's remind the family of this again. Because maybe they weren't ready for it. Like we said, they're just getting through the day to day, but we're coming back that annual mark and we're like, hey, we spoke to you about a van. You said you didn't want the van at this point, but how are we now? How is it going out for your doctor's appointment? Tell me about those challenges. And if they say no, we're going to visit again in another year, or when the family brings it up again.
That's great. I think your point is well made. Don't you think you needed that 3 or 4 or 5? You're shocked at
Yes.
10. Yes. And then at 10, you're shocked at 50.
Yes.
So looking at actually it was a great statement as well. Some of the work you did was a waste of money. And you go back again and you're like, okay, that's out the window. Let me spend more money. So that's such a great point. I'm not hearing you guys.
Yes, it's a great perspective from the fact we have so many families that have children with different ages. So what those that have been in program for like 30 years, reflecting back, where there's one family, the parents are in their 20s and they're looking at a 4-year-old and they're like, I don't want all these modifications done in my home right now. What if we decide to move? And there was a locked into modifications previously, looking at how that picture could look different. Sarah and I had a great conversation of even looked at the do modifications in stages, like, okay, we need this now, but our plans are in 10 years, we're going to do this. And I think that all changes as the child's diagnosis changes, that it's adaptable.
That's great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, on slide 10 here is the process to ensure the program responds to reimbursement request within 15 days of submission. Just for clarification, it's 15 business days in the statute, is that correct?
Yes.
And then how close are we to that right now? Most things, I'm sure some can be processed very quickly and others might take a little bit longer. How close are we on average? Are there claims that are going way over 15 days right now?
For standard claims, so perhaps excluding housing and bans, which take longer for obvious reasons, it's around 5 days right now, so we are clearly within that.
And then housing advance, so that's a good question. So, you know, I can imagine that those claims would drag on significantly longer than 15 days. Are we then, you know, on slide 8 here with the interest payments? No, I'm not sure when the clock starts ticking on a claim like that. Do you have insight into that?
Can I interject here? This is a process by which within 15 days of claim submission, we promptly acknowledge receipt and begin processing.
Okay, so response just means it doesn't mean
Correct.
pay.
It doesn't mean it has to be paid and done within 15 days, so.
But I think we're still aspiring.
Sure,
to do
yeah,
more.
yeah, I agree with that, yeah.
What the legislation is, but yeah, that's and then there's another provision that says you need a timeline. And I think what we're gonna do for housing and bans is set a process and timeline in working with our families. And then at minimum, we have transparency around this, you know, we follow the usual process, this is how long it's gonna take. And I think when we think about unreasonable delays, which of course we're working hard to avoid, you know, we can use concepts, like looking at once all the relevant documentation was submitted, once we have everything we need, that kind of is the starting point for assessing, that let's get it done within 10 business days or 15 business days.
So that's when everything's lined up, you think that's when the clock starts ticking?
I think it's one way to look at it, yeah,
Okay, all right.
when we're trying to move forward and assess reasonableness.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you think about the intent of that particular provision, as you can imagine, I think things were taking significantly longer a year ago, right? And I don't know that the program was consistently acknowledging when a family was submitting a claim, whether that was through a portal or, otherwise the stuff that we are still processing in-house. So I think that was kind of the intent. And as Sarah mentioned, the claims that are processed through Rising are just under 6 days. And as long as we have all the paperwork for something like vans, we are still within that 15-day timeframe.
All right, any other comments, questions, suggestions, feedback?
I do have one. When there is an atypical claim, we are gonna continue to have communications with families. So those that make C-15, we're challenged in that we want to have great communication. If there's delay because of documents, we own that we're gonna communicate to that family in real time so that they know what's going on, that there are any delays internally that they are not aware of.
And if they don't understand, you're there to help them navigate,
Exactly.
to get what they need that
Yes.
we have to have.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah, and again, it's the response, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd say that point is the communication, so, certain benefits like the pension housing, they're actually done in 15 days, right?
No, but I'm
And-
grateful that they're there to
Yeah.
help them navigate getting what they need, because a lot of times when
Yes.
you're on that, I need this, the claimant or the.
Right,
Or
no,
may be absolutely clueless as to how to get you that.
Exactly.
Information
We
you really
need to let them know. We need
And
to
that's
be
where you come
transparent.
into it, yeah. And Sarah, thank you, that was wonderful.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah.
All right, if there's no other comments, session, move to the first update, and I think we're gonna cover that. If you could give maybe the board, I know I'm probably a little more, just what the CARES process or CARES is, why it's there or how it's there. So that's an understanding.
All right, board, thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to present on CARES. I'll get to this graphic here in a minute, but I'll level set up front and we'll talk a little bit about the what, the why, and then the how. What CARES is not is a claims processing system only. So the BPA portal, I'm sure families can recall, that's all it did was process claims. The Vision portal that MCI Rising owns only does claims. CARES is going to do provider assessments, handle all of our accounting and financial operations, gonna handle all of our claims. So right now, only 70% are processed through Rising. CARES will handle them all. So claims processing and benefits administration, case management, which is critical, and then reporting and data management. And having the data in one place, and we'll get into this a little bit more here in a minute, is gonna make reporting out to you all so much easier. It's gonna be like night and day. So at the highest level, this is not going from one claims processing portal to another. This is a much more comprehensive end-to-end integrated system. So this aligns with our broader modernization strategy, and I'll kind of talk through our phases when we get to the goals, which is the next topic. We have engaged with the vendor who works with the Florida program. This is their system, and they have graciously given us or allowed us to use the code such that we can kind of lift and shift a lot of the functionality, and then we're going to customize from there. So this system, as you look at the graphic here, kind of ignore what's on the right now, but when I started back in October, and to an extent what still exists today, is disconnected systems, manual processes, spreadsheets, and then, as I mentioned, the Vision portal does one piece of the pie, but is not the whole pie, which is really, we need a system to do all those things. So while CARES will ultimately replace the current claims processing platform, it's so much more. This initiative is fundamentally about building a comprehensive end-to-end operational infrastructure, which if you recall a couple of board meetings ago, I indicated how immature the program's operational infrastructure was. So it's going to really help significantly with that, and it's intended to provide more integrated, reliable, and sustainable infrastructure for the program so that we can best serve our families and our participants. So, in terms of family experience and transparency, the system is being designed to provide enhanced visibility into each step of claims processing and payment workflows. So right now, families can see to a certain degree sort of the status of their claims as it works through the process in the Vision portal, but the care system is going to have more than that. It's going to have automated communications notifications, as Tammy alluded to, and I think they're probably going to get more communications than what they want. There's also going to be improved self-service tools. So today, if a family would pick up the phone to ask us to look something up or to produce something like a report, they're going to be able to do that themselves. Of course, we're going to have a family-facing portal because that's what the families are used to today, which is a little bit different than the Florida program. And unlike what happens with the Vision portal, we're going to engage the families to tell us how should this be designed, how should it look, how should it function. And we'll include that from the beginning where we get some feedback on what is working with the Vision portal, what is not, and then through the whole process as we go through the development with the vendor. We do have a family member in the audience who has graciously volunteered her time, and for that I'm very grateful. So let's talk about operational modernization. So again, this is not just a claims processing portal. This is going to strengthen operational capabilities through better integration across program functions. So we can get rid of all of these sort of discrete individual siloed spreadsheets that we're currently using. There's multiple systems based on what function you live in. So streamlining all of that, improved auditability, oversight, and reporting. And so while a system like the Vision portal is auditable and they can pull data relatively easily, that's not the case for pretty much anything else within the program today. And everybody knows this who has participated in a data pool for an audit in the past year. So stronger data infrastructure across claims, case management, financial operations, and analytics. And again, this is going to allow us to not only use data to better inform policy making, but also present sort of operational health to the board of directors. We're hoping to produce an annual report in the future. And right now that's really difficult based on how the program is running. And then as Sarah mentioned, this is going to help with our legislative readiness. So the requirements that were written into legislation, CARES is going to allow us to meet those requirements. So that's a little bit of the what. And now transition to the why. So as I mentioned, this is not just replacing one claims processing portal with another. This is really about modernizing the program. So modernizing our operations, our infrastructure. So for both family and staff experience. So now if you look at the graphic on the left, this is sort of a depiction of how we function today. So data, there's multiple disconnected systems and platforms. We use spreadsheets and manual processes. There's duplicate data entry and operational workarounds. Source of truth is hard to locate. And there's separate tools for claims, financial operations, reporting, and case management. And, you know, this is looking under the hood of the car. I've been very transparent at all previous board meetings when I've kind of divulged the challenges that we are working with. And so that's kind of an itemized list of some of the things that we're up against. So as a result, data lives in multiple places instead of a single source of truth. Staff spend a significant amount of time navigating between systems and, more importantly, reconciling information, particularly when we're doing something like an audit or a data pool for an audit, reconciling what is the source of truth. Visibility, reporting, and operational consistency is limited. As I mentioned, manual processes create lots of inefficiency and operational risk. So a major goal of CARES is to create a true one-stop shop, an operational database and a platform for the program, a connected system where claims, case management, financial operations, reporting, provider assessments, and family information work together in a single integrated infrastructure. So we are anticipating that this will create a more connected, transparent, and family-centered infrastructure, improved operational consistency and sustainability, better real-time analytics and reporting for leadership in the board, stronger data quality and oversight capabilities, greater long-term operational control, and reduced reliance on third-party technology and adjudication, services over time, which ultimately will also result in cost savings. So have we engaged FCI Rising? Yes, we have. So we did give them very early notice, and we've had very cordial conversations with them, and we've had several on trying to work through what does the transition timeline look like, what are the activities that need to happen to ensure zero disruption to families. That is our number one goal. And ensure that there is a thoughtful process, a family-informed process, and that when things eventually cut over, that families do not feel it. So when we are walking through the transition approach, our priorities, as I mentioned, is that families don't feel it. That's number one. So continuity for families throughout the transition process, maintaining a system experience that is at least as functional and user-friendly as the current platform, but obviously with the goal being that it's far better. Support broader operational and process redesign efforts, reduce implementation risk through a phased release plan. So again, a key planning principle as we work through all of this with our vendor is that the cutover families should not feel it. It should be seamless. We'll have ample communication, we'll have ample training as we move towards the release or the family-facing release to ensure that everyone is ready. So the family-facing functionality will be introduced in phases and supported through, we're going to do a pilot program with a small group of families, lots of opportunity for family feedback, as I mentioned, training sessions, user guides, and then dedicated support throughout the rollout. And then in terms of the implementation, we'll pause there before I get into implementation and see if there's any questions.
Any questions? I do have one just for the purpose of the board as well. Number one, cost, and number two, the procurement process and timeline.
Yep. I do know that this, the cost of the system was built into the budget that was approved. So Alan, I don't know if you have any more comments about that.
Stephen, do you remember, was it 250?
I think we're putting the board reference.
So the budget for the, go ahead, sorry.
Well, I was gonna say we did it as a sole source and very detailed why we did this. We're getting all the code through. We have an agreement to get the code, we don't have to pay for it in the future. And there's no one else that has this system. And what they went through to get to here, we skipped all those steps. Anyone who's done an IT project and stuff, this is a coup for us to be able to get this and start off where we are with the same vendor. It does the same type of work with some tweaks. We do little things different.
Yeah, I think most critically is we are using the system that our sister program in Florida is using, and we were really wanting a holistic program and not something that does case management over here, claims over here, finances over here, but something that would cover all of them.
So does this program eliminate the TPA?
Yes, it does.
So there's gonna be a transition from Rising to CARES.
Right.
So who's going to be processing the claims through the CARES program?
Our benefits team.
So you won't have, so there'll be all claims processed inside the program through the CARES program.
Right, exactly. And we will have to obviously adapt our process to ensure that we are keeping necessary controls in place, separation of duties, that sort of thing. So as we are working through the legislation, we're also re-looking at all of our processes, which will be true for this as well.
How do you account for the benefit that Verizon provided through their network of providers, the discounted equipment, services, that sort of thing?
So that's a great question. If everyone didn't hear, Rising, in addition to providing the claims processing portal, does offer a few more services. So they have a pharmacy benefit service. They have, it's not DME, but it's like a DME sort of, equipment provider service, which families can use, but they don't have to. And then it also allows for providers to directly bill Rising. We can definitely set up vendor or providers, by providers, I mean MTs, or medical service providers like therapists to direct bill via CARES. That is definitely a possibility. When it comes to the pharmacy benefit, and the DME benefit, those are potentially two services that we will, put out for bid through the procurement process. And Rising would be welcome to bid to be the provider of those services. But it is definitely something that we need to think about if families like those services and want to continue, that we build it into the implementation plan such that we bid out for it, if it's something that families want to continue.
Well, as I said in the meeting yesterday, I want to remind the program that the Birth Injury Act says that you don't have to use the Procurement Act for services so that it's pregnant. So let's keep that in mind as we talk about providing healthcare services to the pregnant.
Thank you, Donegal.
When do we anticipate the transition being completed between us and here?
Perfect question. So although this is going to be a quicker implementation than your traditional IT project, it's still going to be several months. And so we anticipate phase one rollout to include a lot of sort of the back end functionality, but also the provider assessment piece. And we anticipate that, give me 1 second to look at my timeline. That is anticipated to go live October 1st. And then the first family facing release will be release 2, and we anticipate that happening in early 2027. And in talking with the vendor, family functionality and family interface is sort of first. So anything that staff has kind of identified to date as nice to haves or customizations that aren't necessary just to kind of move it over and operationalize it, to basically, process the claims and sort of, it's very much a lift and shift. We're gonna make sure that family desires are in place first, and staff wish list things are, we'll integrate those in later releases.
When does the Rising's contract end? When do their services end?
November. So they've been given early notice, and we are working through an amended contract, first to bring the contract in compliance with BPPA, but also to work through an extension to get us lots of overlap so that, again, the transition is seamless.
Can we be included in those discussions?
Sure.
And review?
Absolutely.
What's the cost of MCRs at this point? I mean, I'm sure we'll get something back as far as choosing them.
So.
Go ahead.
I don't know about that.
Oh, so the pricing structure for this portal and the services that they provide, based on information that was given to them when they onboarded this portal, we are charged a base fee for number of living claimants, and then on top, and then it was a transaction fee for claims above a certain threshold, volume threshold. And so that contract auto renewed in November and probably should have been renegotiated at that point in time. We are in active conversations to kind of renegotiate from the current price structure to a flat fee as we kind of ride out the rest of the contract, and, allowing for an extension such that we are more cost conscious, I'll say. So I think on average right now, we are spending over $100,000 a month.
So for this project, who's managing the project?
I'm the executive sponsor, and we have a team of folks who are working with the vendor based on whatever functionality they want feedback on, so.
Who's overseeing user acceptance?
Family? Is that what you mean? Can you say it in a different way?
User accept, so when you test whatever you're trying to do here, who has to do the testing and sign off that it works? Who oversees, who's doing it?
I would say we haven't gotten that far in the process of planning because we really just started. But I would imagine my frontline staff is gonna be the one testing, and then either I will sign off if that is working as intended, or I might delegate that to another.
And just for context, one of the first things we're building is the assessments, doctor assessments piece. We're storing all that revenue information, and so that will, the user acceptance that is the accounting team. And folks who are gonna be engaging with that and the customer service for the doctors, and then the next phase, which will be more, down the facing, will be, folks who are using that, software in the Procurement campus. So there's actually, there's a lot of different, there's a lot of functionality here, and the different phases will be signed up by different areas.
And the family members that step up to want to try it first,
That's very
they don't have to
Yeah.
do both. They will do it real time with that, and they won't have to do dual entry.
Correct, yes.
So it's gonna be.
And, just out of curiosity, what was Florida's experience with the family adaptability? Because I know there's a wide range of families with different skill sets. Did you get feedback from that?
I don't interface with the Florida program as much. I don't know if Alan has anything to offer.
I can tell you when they switched, it took a while. I think our families are gonna do a lot better because they started a long time ago before it was like the norm. And I also have heard from the Florida program that when they went to CARES, the calls to the program went down significantly because they could look at everything happening with their payments and stuff. They can go online. Where is it in the
They
process?
could see it.
Everything.
And I will say that their program's a little bit different because their families aren't submitting claim requests directly to the portal. Like they are going through their case management team. But our system will allow for direct submission, just like they do today.
I did share that I felt that the population that we serve in Virginia are a little bit more computer aware. Are aware of the resources that those that they serve in Florida. We did need to talk to them and utilizing the tools. They also have ensured that those families that we serve that may not be computer educated or have resources within their home, that they will adapt this program to.
Yeah, we'll still have paper. for sure.
Without bragging.
That's where I was going.
You got it.
But yeah, we'll definitely accommodate folks who don't own a computer or aren't as comfortable with technology, such that they match up with the systems. That belong to the system.
All right, any other questions? Comments? All right, thank you, Kim.
We'll have the next one, which I can see.
Yeah, as I said, we're doing program updates.
All right, so as you can feel, I hope, Ford, and our families, there has been significant change that the program has gone through over the last few months. And I wanted to sort of take this opportunity before the members of my team and my colleagues take the opportunity to highlight a few specific initiatives to briefly provide some context as to how they fit into a bigger plan. So when I joined the organization, there was a few stabilization efforts going on, but there was not yet sort of a single integrated framework that connected all of these things together such that it was a comprehensible roadmap for our teams and certainly not for our families. So what I sought to develop was sort of a more visual, connected operational strategy with defined goals, objectives, initiatives, ownership, sequencing, and measurable outcomes. So over the past several months, I developed this framework, which you'll see here. This is just a visual depiction of a very busy spreadsheet that I am maintaining and updating. To organize and align the organization's stabilization, modernization, and transformation efforts. So you can see here in this visual up top, there are lots of things that we're doing to continue to stabilize. There are many things that we are doing to modernize. And then while we haven't quite gotten to the transformation phases yet, those things are in the pipeline. And then I'll show you a better, maybe a less busy, more clear graphic. Thank you, right here. This just kind of highlights the phases a little bit more. So the phases purposely overlap. And again, we are still stabilizing. We aren't that far out of the woods yet. But these 5 goals that you see here on the left cover all of the things. So stabilization efforts, modernization efforts, and transformation. In addition to building this goal structure itself, defining all the supporting objectives and initiatives, and organizing the work into phase implementation tracks, we're hoping that this visual and the spreadsheet that kind of goes behind it, provides clear operational alignment across teams. So again, I'm hoping that some of the improvements that families are feeling, they're already experiencing, sorry. So, you know, starting with the philosophy reset when Alan came in, we have undergone several sort of operational restructuring to expand and improve family support. Our policy modernization efforts, so before Sarah and Susan joined the team, there was no policy function at the program. So reading the tea leaves, I felt like that was a strong need and gap that we needed to address. And so many of these things are in flight. They're still being developed and being operationalized through this structure. So because the spreadsheet, as I mentioned, is a very busy thing. If you can flip back, Shelby. We have 68 initiatives. So some things that have already started and are in flight, some things that we have not yet started, that we would anticipate going beyond sort of the end of 2026, but they all line up to these 5 goals. So strengthening governance, compliance, and financial stewardship, modernizing operations, systems, and process infrastructure, establishing trusted data and decision support infrastructure, enhancing program delivery, policy, and family experience, and then building organizational capacity, culture, and strategic positioning. So all 68, almost 70 initiatives kind of ladder up to these 5 things. And the intent of this framework is to move us from a reactive way of doing things, which was very much the case when I started, into a more coordinated, accountable, and family-centered organization with clear long-term direction. As I mentioned, this is not meant to be a linear roadmap. If you want to flip back, Shelby, the phases overlap intentionally. We are stabilizing core operations still while trying to simultaneously modernize and then beginning to transform how the family feels and experiences the program. So again, this is sort of just an alternate view. So if you go to the next slide, Shelby, I'm just going to tee you up for the initiatives that you're going to hear from next. And I do believe we might cut financial stewardship, but I'll leave it to David's discretion. So you are bringing us back to what you're going to hear next. Our next agenda items are highlights of several of these initiatives. This visual is to help frame how they fit into this larger framework. So you're going to hear from Shelby, who's going to brief you on our internal decision-making tree, which is an initiative that falls under goal number 1. You're going to hear from Sarah again, and she's going to outline our new policy development process, including how the Family Advisory Committee is involved. And that's an initiative under goal number 4. And then finally, if David wants to keep it, if not, we'll punt it to a future meeting. Shelby and I will brief you on a comprehensive review of existing vendors, applications, and services to identify cost savings and efficiencies, which is an initiative that falls under goal number 2. So with that, I will turn things over to Shelby, unless there are questions about goals.
How many different initiatives are you trying to work on?
68.
Do you have timelines?
We are working on that right now. And we do realize that 68 is a very unheard of audacious goal. And so if we accomplish half of those, I would still consider it a success. But we are outlining timeframes for each of those. And now that we have a more robust team, I feel like we are more capable in accomplishing more than where we were a couple of months ago.
Is it 5,068?
You're getting to that.
That's a lot.
It is.
I'm trying to think how you.
Yeah, and that's a good question, because if you go back to the 2 strategic highest priority items right now are the legislative implementation and the CARES implementation. So those 2 things trump everything else, and everything kind of falls together.
Will you have the ability to share how you came up marking the 68 with us?
Yeah, I don't have it today,
No,
but for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm not used to having that many, you can have that many, but it's
It is.
a lot to try, yeah, I'm sitting there going, how do you know?
It is.
Is that every time something was brought up, did that sticky on my wall?
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah.
Not quite. I mean, we have definitely lumped some things together to make it sort of a broader initiative, but as you can imagine, there's a lot of things that need addressing. But yes, we will come back with sort of a prioritization structure or framework.
That's a lot.
But that's a yeah. Thank you all so much.
We have enough people still.
We'll let you know if we don't. Thank you, board, so much.
Oh,
Right here. I'm gonna try this with her. Come into the hot seat.
Or to apply.
Wow, drink some water. Are you gonna keep the clicker? Yeah. Okay. So good morning, everyone. I know most of you, but my name is Shelby Buckner. I'm the Chief of Staff of the program. So I know the common theme here, and we've been talking about this a lot, is our commitment to putting families at the center of everything that we're doing. And just working more closely with them along the way. So today I want to share a visual that we've created to reflect how we make decisions internally and how we bring families in when decisions do affect them. So got a decision tree here. The goal is very simple. It's every decision that we make, we want to be thoughtful, consistent, and focused on impact. So looking here at the top, step one is we figure out exactly what needs to be decided. Okay, and I will preface this by saying some of these issues and problems that may come up can come from multiple sources. It can come from staff internally, it can come from the board, families, taking all of those into consideration. So in that first step, we're looking at exactly what is the problem, what needs to be decided, what are the facts. This makes sure we're solving the right problem from the beginning, and also identifying whether families will be impacted by the decision. So we move down to step two, and this is where we're going to ask whether a decision could change. This is, or does it affect program benefits? So this would be things like who qualifies for services, what services families are able to access, how much support families are receiving, how care is delivered and managed. If the answer to any of those questions is yes, we're going to move into a formal policy development process, which Sarah is going to talk about a little bit more here shortly. If no, we're going to move down to step three. She'll prompt us to ask the next question, which is, would family input make things better? And so for a lot of the things we've found along the way that this is true in most cases. So examples of this would be updates to our website, educational materials, how we deliver services, how we communicate. So if any of those are the case, we will reach out to families, whether that be back or kind of more the whole family community as a whole, through surveys, conversations with them. So things that would not fall into this category would be things more related to personnel, what kind of K-cups we want to order this month for coffee, things like that do not affect families. So regardless of how we're making these decisions, which step along the way, I'm going to switch to the next slide here. Our internal decision-making policy is going to follow these steps. First, analyze. Look at the data, what the decision actually requires. Next, we're going to consult with the right team members or family members, stakeholders. Then we decide. Leadership will be involved in making the best course of action. Fourth step, document. We're going to write down what the decision was and the rationale behind it. Communicate. We're going to ensure we share it with the right people, and this is going to mean communicating clearly with staff prior to the decision or as the decision is made, but also communicating clearly with families, especially as it involves them. And then finally, implement. Put it into action and track how it goes. So no matter how decisions are made, we just want to make sure we are following up and communicating the outcome. And when the decision affects families directly, we're making sure that they are informed. This process ensures that we are thoughtful in how we make decisions, inclusive when input is important, and that we are accountable for our actions. Thank you all very much. I'm going to hand it over to Sarah to go into a little bit more detail about this policy development process, unless you all have any questions.
Any questions from the board?
No.
Sarah, thank you.
We have her coming up a lot because we like her accent.
If there's anything you don't like that I say, just listen to how I say it. All right, so as Shelby mentioned, I'm going to talk you through the policy development process. We are standing this up in collaboration with our Family Advisory Committee, and this work will really ramp up in July once we get through the rapid review and legislative alignment process. So we are implementing an evidence-based standardized process that will help us work with families to develop, monitor, and optimize the way we administer the benefits. So as we've heard theme today, we want to facilitate family-centered policy and design. We want to promote consistent and fair administration of benefits, and we want to do that as efficiently as possible. So again, we're coming back to streamlining things that we've done in the past. And importantly, given the new availability of better data that is coming from the care system and other sources, we will be able to better evaluate and improve policy over time to avoid any unintended consequences and refine things so that our families are getting the benefits in the best way possible. So the process that we're standing up is adapted from an established policy development process that's used in other areas of health-related policy making. So this is based on work that's been going on for many years. The process calls for evidence-based policy making and data-informed policy making. So that's something that we are going to strengthen over time. There are dedicated mechanisms for family and community input. So we've talked today a lot about the FAC and the great input we've received from them. But going forward, we'll be widening the input to ensure that all of our families, whether or not they're on FAC, have opportunities to input into our policy making process. The way this policy making process works, it facilitates multi-goal decision making. So we can think about trade-offs when you're thinking about efficiency, consistency, fairness. So we want to think through all of the different impacts that the way we design policy have and make sure that's optimized for our families as well. So there'll be a few different policy pathways. I'll talk you through the standard policy development pathway in a little bit more detail, and then I'll touch on some faster, more expedited pathways where appropriate. So the next slide has a visual of what this standard policy development process will look like. And you can see there are 8 steps here. Next slide. The first one is gathering ideas from a range of sources, of course, and really working to prioritize what is most important. And that is a decision that will rely on feedback from our family. In fact, is actively working with us right now to prioritize what are the first policies they want to review come July 1. So we've already started that work. The second step, once we've identified our priorities, will be to do the analysis of the problem as well as the potential different solutions. We'll be using whatever methodologies are appropriate, and that's going to vary from project to project, data analysis, literature reviews, and consultation with stakeholders where necessary. All projects will have a plan, including timeline and resources, and all of this will vary depending on the complexity of the policy change. Some will be straightforward and fast, others will be more holistic and complicated. A key part of the process is drafting policy proposals. That includes draft policy language as well as metrics that we will use to make sure the policy is having the intended impacts going forward. Community and family feedback, next slide please, will happen throughout this process. It can be generating ideas, it can be pointing out maybe problems with policies that need to be reviewed. But I also wanted to call out specific mechanisms for feedback. So of course we have our FAC meetings, and we're going to stand up other mechanisms so that other families can read, can engage, and can give us feedback on the policies before they are finalized. Policies will of course be approved either by the executive director or the board as appropriate, and that will be done after that community feedback is analysed and any revisions are made. Planning for implementation should be occurring, towards the beginning of the process and throughout to make sure that when we are initiating changes, families are aware, staff are aware, and everybody has the support they need to make the changes seamless when policies are implemented. And as I've referenced, we are going to have monitoring and evaluation on an ongoing basis to pick up any issues and refine policies as necessary. What will this look like going forward? So what we're thinking through is having policy development cycles throughout the year. There could be, say, 3 of those. So we do the work up over a few months. And then the families will know, the community will know at this point in time in June, we're going to have a window where we seek engagement and family feedback. We share all the materials, we socialize what the proposed change is, and we receive feedback. So that would be a potential cadence through which we could make these changes over time and also monitor them and report out to the program, the board, or other stakeholders for anything that needs refining. There's also 2 additional pathways, the expedited pathway, which will be used for changes that are necessitated by legislation or regulatory changes or any kind of emergency health or safety issues. So that may look like a little bit like the rapid review process that we're doing now in response to legislation. And then there would obviously be a very streamlined process for any clarifications or corrections that need to be made to existing policies. So as I said, we are still working on this, developing this with the FAC, and we are looking forward to rolling it out from July. That's it. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Board, any questions to repeat that? Yes, sir. Thank you for putting that out. Adds a lot of clarity, so appreciate that. The third item here is this financial stewardship. I think I want to have you guys address that opposite because of the role we serve, right? So, and it looks fairly brief. So Kim, I don't know, Kim or Shelby. Address that.
If she stepped out. So, as Kim mentioned earlier, we are moving the program from stabilization to modernization. So this means we are taking a structured discipline look at every dollar that we're spending, how we're spending it, who we contract with, and the systems we run on. So the goal is to cut what isn't earning its keep, tighten our controls, and align our spending with our mission and the families that we serve. So we are doing this in 3 primary areas: procurement and financial controls, vendors and contractors, and systems and tools. So this slide right here kind of summarizes our before. So this time last year, procurement was handled reactively and consistently. There was no clear process for making decisions about vendors or tools. We also had too many vendors across multiple areas and a lot of outside contractors doing work that could have been handled internally. So we were seeing the same issues existing with a lot of the systems we were using. There were a lot of overlapping tools, manual workarounds, and little to no integration between platforms. So over time, over the years, loose oversight allowed these problems to continue to grow. So now I'm going to flip to the after slide here in these 3 areas. So at this point in time, with the help of Crystal, we have all of our agreements are being reviewed to make sure they follow Virginia procurement rules and our internal policies. So we know this is what the Commonwealth expects, and we are making strong progress towards that goal. So we've continued to reduce unnecessary vendors. We're using internal staff when it makes sense, and are choosing more cost-effective and state-supported solutions whenever possible. We are also streamlining our systems and making clear decisions about what should stay, be replaced, or be phased out through CARES. As a result of the work we've been doing over the past 2 months alone, we have identified around $1 million in savings improved our audit readiness, and have made measurable progress toward the level of compliance expected by the state. So we see this as not just a one-time cleanup effort, but really building a more disciplined, accountable, and sustainable operating model for the future of the program. The expectation moving forward is stronger controls, smarter spending, better systems, and decisions that that can withstand public scrutiny and state oversight. Our responsibility is not only to protect the fund financially, but to ensure every operational decision strengthens our ability to serve families long-term. This progress made over the last 2 months shows that it is possible with focused oversight, clear accountability, and modernization mindset. Thank you very much. I'm happy to take any questions related to some of those changes.
So these are operational functions.
Yeah.
Not financial controls, operational financial controls.
You,
Financial controls is what.
Yes.
does.
yes, please.
Yeah, we will, we'll bring into the audit committee on June 9th, a financial controls document. This is
Yes,
separate.
this is separate.
Operation.
That's what it's operational. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I do that
This is
for him.
operational. This is not finance. Okay.
Controls more in the sense of how we are
How you
selecting
operate,
vendors,
how you
yeah,
operate.
how we are selecting vendors,
Okay.
yeah, how we're vetting them, yes.
Is the $1 million savings, in what period of time is that?
We're looking at the amount that we have cut from last year, like external vendors and contractors that we've now brought internally.
We look at every single contract.
Yeah, one of the things that has kept Crystal extremely busy, aside from, the sole source postings she has been going through all of our contracts, identifying areas that do not align with BPDA, making those adjustments with the vendors. And then we also have been along that process identifying where we're no longer we don't need this anymore, or this is something we can bring internally to cut costs.
Go ahead.
Can you disclose what those are?
We can, some of them, well, one of them being.
No, not right now. You said, maybe next meeting you can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll just-
You know how you feel. I'd like to provide those next meetings, a list of some of the big ones, yeah, so we can see what it is. That's major.
Huge. We were just thrilled.
Yeah, that's major.
Yeah, one of the questions I have for the OAG's office, do you guys have copies of all contracts at this point? I know there was a request of that last year, whether that ever came from. My understanding was that never came to fruition, so has there been a coordination to make sure we have all contracts?
I haven't seen any contracts since the project was. I don't think I've seen any.
We can certainly,
Yeah.
we can,
Actually, I did see one. There was one with the Department of Health that Susan sent me. Did you send me anything on? Yeah.
Well, I think one of the good things is having the procurement officer, we have one place where they all are covered, because finding them all was like, who's got that?
Yeah, Crystal did a lot of
Yeah.
that legwork for
That was-
sure, so now we can much more easily give you what we have and have a confidence level and what we have and what we don't.
Okay, so, I mean, from a board's perspective, I think, that is important, so council is delivering the contracts.
Yeah. This is the first I heard of it, so we will absolutely get on it.
We had spoken about previously, is there a process where they review certain contracts before you actually bid them, or is, we don't have, that's something I.
Well, these were terminations.
No, I'm talking about going, like an ongoing, when you have a new contract, are they, because that's one of the things I brought up a while ago. Is, are they looking at these contracts before we execute them? Someone, some lawyer is looking at this stuff before we do it, some like legal sufficiency, that we dotted i's cross t's and we don't have any exposures from that perspective, but that's something I know I'm in trouble about.
Yeah, well, I know there was previous issues, with contracts that we saw well after the fact, so,
Crystal has identified, there's certain boilerplate language that is required by the state to be in our contracts that, with certain vendors, and that is, something we have reviewed with, Kimberly Mitchell, our, BDS representative. And she's kind of helped us ensure that those are compliance.
okay.
But
Yeah,
as far as sharing, any
Yeah,
contracts.
that's something I'm pushing there, there's nothing that we should be
Yeah.
signing this material, We have two lawyers in here that are assigned to us.
Well, if you're sharing, like, I don't think we've executed new contracts other than the CARES one.
I don't think so.
Yeah,
And they've seen that.
Terminated contract.
we just been.
Yeah, have they seen? Did they see the CARES one where you actually?
Not sure.
See, that's the legal sufficiency that I'm used to seeing, is having a legal sufficiency, just like you have a financial review, but you should be a legal, that covers everything, covers the plan, also covers you all too, because then they've seen it, so.
Well, and from my standpoint, gotta be careful when you're exiting a contract, interpreting a contract, and make sure that we're not breaching.
That's why, yeah.
Could be a financial cost of that.
There are certain clauses that you can't have in the contract, for example.
That's why.
Indemnification is not allowed, things like.
So I'd request the purpose, obviously make sure before the use office, regard to all contracts, exit. Number one. Sarah's an attorney too, by the way. All right, awesome. Got it, I'm texting. What's that? I said I knew that too. We have an aisle as well, just make sure. Okay, any other, questions? Comments?
Savings,
All right.
it's like.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to seeing $1 million.
Yes.
$1 million.
There were a couple of times that it was said, what would the family say if we had this contract? Let's get rid of it. So that kind of, you know, even when you're not there, you're there. So, you know.
So now we'll talk about this. Who was right for the families?
I'm done.
Okay, so, next item on the agenda is public comment, so I don't know if we have anybody, public comment.
I will confirm, but I don't think there was one that had signed up, but I don't even think she is on that.
I will stop favor here, but
Yeah.
public comments. I was saying, Rusty, you're here. I'll open that up to you.
Mr. Chairman, just one quick comment, just a reminder, I guess. With public comment, somebody cannot be precluded from offering public comment because they didn't sign.
No, understood, I just didn't know.
Yeah.
If there is somebody that didn't sign up.
And I can just mention this now for the virtual audience. If there is anyone that maybe didn't sign up for public comment but would like to speak, you can use the hand raise tool and we will open it up for you as well.
If you're more comfortable there.
I just wanted to know, I'm very happy that the procurement mess has been cleaned up. I made statements about procurement in front of this board before. You know, one of the things that I heard here today was the idea that we do we need to use VAPA except when we are dealing with the healthcare of the child. One thing that does concern me though, because of something I heard, my understanding is that statutory provision was more like, if the fund is going to buy a wheelchair for my child, we do not have to go through VAPA to get the wheelchair funding for the child. I'm a little concerned when I hear that some certain administrative I understand that the rising contract fell under healthcare of the child, and that some of these administrative contracts fall under caring for the healthcare of the child, and I don't think that that should be the case. I think to Kim's point, the rising contract maybe was renewed a little too quickly and not looked at as closely as it should have been had it fallen under VAPA. I also want to make sure that there are some protections, maybe in review of contracts for things that are not fixed fee. For example, the mine salt contract, which I think exceeded $500,000 and for which I don't think we have a lot to show for it, was not a fixed fee contract. It was an hourly contract with sort of like a handshake that we'll probably try to keep it under X hours. And again, it was done through an emergency procurement, and so I want to make sure that these things are looked at ahead of time. I'm really, really happy to hear that we're talking about age appropriate recommendations and activity. 5 years ago, I was absolutely adamant that we would never get a ceiling lift in our house, that it would be fine, and my back has told me differently this week. And so we are now in the process of looking for a ceiling lift before I throw it out again. One thing I also want to talk about as we talk about policies is that even before the new legislation was passed, there are certain decisions and policies that the program was really not allowed to make, specifically the denying claims that are over a year old. That is settled, not only is that not in your authority, but it is settled law with a very clear lawsuit that states that, and also not, because I think this was talked about in one of the meetings. not being able to say whether or not we can go to an out-of-network, requiring prior authorization for an out-of-network, provider. I want to just assure everybody that when we choose an out-of-network provider, it makes 3 times as much paperwork for us for everything. We're not doing it on purpose or for fun. It's because that's the provider that is best, that is available at a particular time. And I also want to say that while I sat here and I was writing this statement over here while you guys were talking, like, I actually deleted like 2 or 3 paragraphs because while I was writing them, someone would answer the question and I didn't have to say. So happy for everything that's happening here.
Thank you.
Hi, the governor is, taking some of the front row out of but just want to make 2 brief comments. First of all, Alan Polsky, I'm Chris's father, I'm the grandfather of her friends. I too am very, very pleased with almost everything I've heard. I say almost because I didn't understand a lot of it. But I will say that I've been here before, with the previous administration, and I've heard all sorts of rosy descriptions as to what was going on. Now, at that time, I knew what I was hearing was fiction bordering on fantasy. I am very, very happy to hear that you are inviting the families in to participate. So we're going to be able to know that in the future, what we hear here is going to be nonfiction. And I'm very, very pleased with that. I've heard some discussions about policymaking and regulation, and I'm a little confused as to whether or not you're conflating two. And as Marissa said, that in the past there were, I guess you could call it, to be kind, a hodgepodge of regulations and policy previously, which were done with very questionable authority. I would hope that anything that you're going to be doing now, you will know who has the legal authority to do it, as well as having the input from the families. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We actually have 2 hands raised, so I'm going to open it up first to Mr. Sturgis Kidder.
Good morning. I just wanted to say thank you to the board and to the staff that's now on board. The changes that I've seen over the last, 5 months have been just unimaginable a year ago. Alan's brought a new sense of family first to the program, and the staff that's there now also exhibits that. And I did want to comment about the board moving in the right direction, even in spite of the legislation. We knew the board was moving in that direction and that it would ultimately get there. But as we all know, the board is not a permanent board. And as the board changes over the years, those concepts of family first may be diluted somewhat. So we wanted to make sure that the enacting legislation had that in there. And we actually talked with one of the originators of the enacting legislation. So I just wanted to make that clear. We knew you were moving in that direction, but we just wanted to make sure that future boards knew what the rules were. But thank you all so very much. And thank you for volunteering your time to serve on the board. I know it's not an easy thing to do and not convenient sometimes. So, but thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, one more, we have Ruth Ann Reeves. You there, Ruth Ann?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi. My name is Ruth Ann Reeves. I'm participant Ethan Evian's mother. He's 22 years old, just as an overview, to premise behind my experience and his experience as well. I wanted to start off by saying I really appreciate and am looking forward to all of the changes. And it's pretty exciting. And it's neither here nor there, in my opinion, past or whatever, because, we're moving forward. So that's semi-irrelevant. One thing that I did want to bring up just from someone with a son of the age bracket that my son is in. It's always ever changing and very unique for each person that is a participant. But some of the examples that I just wanted to highlight, just as something like maybe somebody within this group would take into consideration. I do want to also highlight that I have had great communications with the current leadership, and I'm confident that the interim director, Alan, and everyone else will pick a great director moving forward. So that's exciting as well. But my point was, I heard about some of my questions were answered with the new system that's going to be implemented, because the current one isn't as user friendly as it's said to be. So with that being said, the time consuming effort for timesheets, at least me personally, and I'm in the 40 to 45 age bracket, meaning I'm pretty tech savvy. So it's not an error on my part. But with that being said, I don't really understand why the participant and their family has to pay up front for certain things and then wait to get reimbursed. For example, my son will wear briefs the rest of his life. So I don't really understand why we have to pay $225, go through this process when it's something that I feel as though, with all this talk about vendors, and there's too many vendors, I believe I heard somebody say, which I don't even really, what vendors are available. In my experience, people that my son has, healthcare providers that my son's had his whole life, I have to wait a year and get statements saying that he's, in collections. I've done all my due diligence, one of which was just recently addressed. But I'm hoping that whatever this next system is, when we give that information to whatever healthcare provider, it's not an act of Congress to actually get it reimbursed. And I've done all my due diligence, emails to either party, trying to get it resolved throughout the year. And it definitely has progressed, and one of which has been paid with the current communications. But it's just a lot of time and effort into something that I feel as though there has to be a better way. And I'm hoping that this new system will be the better way. And when I'm speaking of healthcare systems, any other participants, and there's other participants in this area, they would be using the same systems. I live in Lynchburg, Virginia, and so I'm hoping that this new system, y'all are taking that into consideration. I would presume that you are, just like a very easier way of doing this. I mean, I have Anthem for primary, and then that's secondary. So, you know, I just think there should be a better way. I don't even know what the way is, because that's not my profession. But with that being said, I hope that there will be some differences with that. And then also the timesheet process, I'm not going to address, because hopefully that's going to be addressed moving forward. Um, and then I also wanted to speak on a situation that I hope moving forward won't happen for another family. And I have addressed it with Alan. He was very nice about it, very considerate. Every person that I've spoken to this year about it, because it seemed like maybe these individuals would maybe look into it. They were very interested, for lack of better terms, and wanted to provide a solution. But either way, in 2024, I had a medical emergency, and I was unable to care for my son for 6 months. Mind you, I had to go back and forth with I don't remember who the director's name was at the time, but mind you, I'm fighting for my own health. And so nobody has the energy or the time to go back and forth. So when I went back to work, I was on short-term disability. I went into financial burden, not because of my employer, but because I had to self-pay multiple caregivers, over $10,000, to be honest with you. I didn't have the funds for that, and I had to figure it out. But it was unacceptable to me. And at the time, they wouldn't even tell me how many hours my son was approved for. And it was also my negligence, meaning, I mean, after you send 25 emails, I didn't at the time have time to go to Richmond, go in front of the board. I'm trying to figure out how I'm even going to maintain my life health wise to continue to care for my son, which is my main priority. So, with that being said, I'm trying to collect all the data so that I can get reimbursed for that. But it's still very overwhelming, because you have to do your, daily life work thing, same thing everybody else is doing. So I'm hoping that moving forward, that's not going to happen anymore, because for me, it also provided extra stress financially when I should have been just concerning myself with my own health and well-being and taking care of my son and navigating who I could get to take care of my son. So that was a huge financial burden for me that I've never been compensated for. Mind you, there's no way for me to even look up the timesheets because it was a different system and then it was this system. And I just feel like there should be a data collection that somebody can facilitate all of that. At the time, I only utilized 80 hours because that's all they would reimburse. Mind you, I couldn't take care of my son at all. And I was one of the, family caregivers, for lack of better terms. So previously, I had a medical situation maybe 10 years prior, and under that administration, I didn't have any issues with it. I literally sent an email, showed, hey, I'm on short term disability, and it was simple. It was not simple for this, and it was exhausting. So I'm hoping I can recoup the money that was a financial burden. I mean, obviously, it's 2 years later at this point. So I'm hoping that they'll have things in place for those type of situations that if somebody's in the hospital, it's kind of hard. I mean, maybe somebody's fighting for their life. I mean, it could be worse than I was. And how would you have the ability to do all those things? I mean, I understand you have to have other people, um, power of attorney or whatever might be needed if that was the case. But I'm just saying, I don't think that a family should have to have that financial stress on top of whatever they're dealing with. So I hope that that'll be addressed moving forward, if anybody else is ever in that circumstance as a parent. Um, but I was able to figure out how many hours that my son was approved for. And at that time, he was approved for 160 hours, which I didn't know that. Because I never got any confirmation back and forth because my son does require 24/7 care. With that being said, he's very bright, social. All of his issues are motor, as in he just can't take care of himself, but he has the mentality and ability to communicate great. And I'm very thankful for that. And then another example was I've had the same van for 10 years. Part of the reason that I hadn't traded it in was I needed some work done on it. And at that time, it was going to take 6 weeks. I don't have the funds to pay for a rental vehicle so I can take my son. So, it took 2 years to get my vehicle, his vehicle, excuse me, fixed. Mind you, I spent $7,000. I got a motor, a transmission. This is funds that I would never utilize if that was my personal vehicle because it wasn't worth it, but I was forced to do that. So there's another $7,000 that I had to spend that I didn't have. And that's basically why I had to put off the adapting the house to my son's needs because I didn't have $35,000 plus that, all these different amounts. I mean, I work full time, do my due diligence, and I try to be a good steward of his funds for sure. So I don't know if I'll be able to get these different increments of money back or not. But it was brought to my attention later on that exceptions should have been made because of the amount of money that it was going to cost for a vehicle that's not even worth $8,000. So that was pretty unfortunate. So I'm hoping moving forward with the changes and more leeway for the board and the people there that people won't have to go into financial debt for things that are out of their control. And my son is an individual that he wants to be out socially. He doesn't want to sit at the house. I cannot not have a vehicle to take him into the community and do the things that satisfy him to be the person that he is. That's my obligation to him. And I have to figure out a way, regardless of transportation, for that to happen. So there was never any, whatever way I had to do it, get a, truck, let's get two people to put his wheel, things that probably people within this community to have done on their own so they would understand how that goes just to get your child somewhere they want to go. But I don't feel like I should have had to do that. So hopefully moving forward, it'll be easier for that. So those are just two examples. And then I also was curious when it comes to emails. If a staff member leaves the organization, for lack of better terms, I would presume that IT, just like if somebody did a FOIA request, would have access to those emails. Is that correct, or is that a valid question for me to ask?
That is correct.
Okay. So a lot of what I'm speaking of, there was emails, but I've spoken to some people that can't find the emails. So I've never really understood that aspect either because I'm supposed to go collect all this information that I already submitted, sent all my paperwork, short-term disability, showed all the proof, and all of that. So I was just curious. I would presume that IT has the ability, there would be some type of secure emailing if I'm emailing an organization person with Virginia birth injury as the ending of that. So that's good information. And then, every parent's income, I would presume, is different. So that's why I still go back to some of the obligations that the parents have when nobody knows what that person's income is, to just have the funds to pay for the caregivers first, to pay for this and then wait or hope for a reimbursement, which now it looks like we'll be getting reimbursed. And this is just my personal experience. It could be totally different for other people. And then most of the other questions that I have, I'm just going to watch it all unfold because it looks positive, and I do trust the current, for lack of better terms, administration. But another thing that I wanted to mention is I've worked for a state agency. Well, I don't anymore, but I worked for a state agency for 17 years. I don't understand why in the system, and maybe it will be, there can't be, if we have vendors that the parents utilize, why can't we do like an approval process? Hey, this is, just like if I need to buy something and then my supervisor approves it, there's a card associated with it or whatever the case might be, and then it's paid versus I got to pay it, take a screenshot of it, upload it, hope that the system's going to work that day, and so on and so forth. So I hope that maybe that would be something that could be feasible. I'm not really sure, but for certain vendors, such as, I'll bring up the briefs again, it should just be automatically paid. I don't feel like I should have to pay for that and then wait to get it reimbursed. It's not something that's going to change. It was how it was before. And then I think it was like 2025, maybe it changed. And it might seem like a minimalistic cost to some, but it's not to me, because I also look at the greater picture of other people, not just me, other families, for lack of better terms. And then I was also curious about I wrote it down. Sorry about that. Um, all right, so that's basically all I had to say about that. And then the last thing is I have changed employers, and I was just curious overall, other situations set precedent and then everything's unique. Um, my son had a lot of equipment, just ironically, that was going to, for lack of better terms, hit my insurance this month. So I went ahead and enacted Cobra insurance, which was $2,500. Is that something that Virginia Birth Injury would be willing to reimburse for however many months until these different equipments are paid for? Because it would be more of a better steward for my son, for Virginia Birth Injury to pick up that versus pay $8,000 or $9,000 for something. Is that something that Virginia Birth Injury has done before?
Well, Mr. Reese, this is Chair DeGrasse. Some of the questions you have are program related, that would be probably operational, the day-to-day decisions, obviously, you can speak with the program with. Some of those things aren't direct or board of director related necessarily, but
Okay.
sure. I think probably the program staff will be able to follow up with you on some of that and answer some of your questions for you. Okay?
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr.
I'll get her piece of answer to follow up.
Okay.
Piece
Thank you.
A lot of those questions we do have answers to.
Okay. Yeah.
We do have one more hand up. We have Ann Jones. Ann, can you hear? You should be able to speak.
Can you hear me? Can anybody
Yes.
hear me? Okay. I'm Ann Jones. I'm a lawyer who represents many of the kids in the program, or the young adults now. And I have a concern that I wanted to raise. That's an amount that can be a sneaky expense that sneaks up on you all. I'm trying to be able to see you, but I don't know how to give you my camera. Are you seeing me, or are you just seeing my picture?
I see your picture.
Well, I wish I knew how to let you see me, but at any rate, an area of expense that I think a significant expense that can sneak up on the board, at least without them necessarily seeing it coming, are the litigation expenses in some of these cases that get litigated. And I'm afraid the board may be hearing about these cases only after they are lost and significant fees have been incurred. And a recent case that resolved involved a premature baby, and we tried the case back in January of 2024. We waited a year and a half for a ruling, and then we waited a little bit more time to figure out damages for the family and attorney's fees. And but because of the aggressive way that the case was litigated, and it was a type of case that had been litigated before. We've been litigating the same case for 30 years, on and off. Every few years, it seems like the Attorney General's office or George Debo or I don't know who would decide to take another run at the preemies. And we had won and fought this case many times with published opinions. And what we ended up with is our office spending unbelievable amounts of time hiring a ton of expert witnesses. The Attorney General's office, I don't know what the current contract the program pays them is, but at the time this case was pending, the Attorney General's office was getting a straight $335,000 a year for the services of one lawyer, one paralegal, and maybe a little bit of supervision above. So they were paying $335,000. Plus they hired outside counsel, and I don't know what they paid outside counsel to help them try the case. And they took on 6 experts. Well, I don't know what the total fees were when you look at both sides, but I know that we settled for $622,000 to be paid to Jones and Rostand as expenses in a case that the program fought despite case law, despite history indicating that the baby was likely going to get in. But I know that there was at least half again that much the program spent to defend itself, and likely very much more. And I believe the actual cost to fight to keep a baby out that got in the program was close to $1 million. Again, I told you that my limitations, I know what we were paid, and I have some ideas about what the costs were others. And I would like to urge, in my understanding is that the board has not traditionally been involved in the decision about what cases to fight and what cases to not fight. And we've got some cases pending, I'm not going to get into any of them, that decisions about fighting were made by George Debo and Carla Collins, who are both gone now. And, because of COVID-19 and other craziness, these cases that were fought back in 2019 and 2020, but have been hanging in limbo, are going to have to be completed. And I think it would behoove the program board to put some protections in place about who is making decisions about what cases are going to be fought and what aren't, and the expenses, and to maybe play a more active role in that, so that they don't get surprised by $1 million in expenses in litigation for kids that got in the program anyway. That is my advice. I'm done unless someone has a question for me.
Thank you, Ann.
You're welcome.
All right, any other?
Nope.
Okay, so that'll conclude our public comments. At this point, I move that the board of directors of the Virginia Bird-related Neurological Injury Compensation Program during the closed meetings for the following reasons: discussion, consideration, or interviews for candidates for employment, the assignment, appointment, promotion, performance, salary, discipline, termination, or resignation of existing employees, the subject of which are: 1, interviews regarding the executive director position; 2, discussions of candidates for the executive director position; 3, the duties, assignment, and performance of specific former and current program employees, resulting action pursuant to the personnel exemption to 2.237(1). And number 2, to consult with the legal counsel pertaining to actual probable litigation where such consultation would adversely affect the negotiating or litigating posture of the public body, the subject of which are pending claims and cases against and in favor of the Virginia Bird-related Neurological Injury Compensation Program pursuant to the legal counsel consultation exemption of VA Code 3711, page 7, and number 3. Consultation with legal counsel employed or retained by a public body regarding specific legal matters requiring provision of legal advice by such counsel, the subject of which are: 1, pending claims and pending cases against and in favor of the Virginia Vertebrae-related Neurological Injury Compensation Program, and 2, impact of statutory changes effective July 2026 pursuant to legal counsel consultation exemption of Virginia Code 2.2 3711. Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Vice Chair Dillon. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Ayes have it. So at this point, we will be moving into closed session. Thank you.